I had been totally head over heels for my girlfriend Emma for a decade. Everything changed when I decided to take her to meet my parents one last time after they were in a terrible accident. Right then, she bailed on me. Her excuse? The senior, Alex, had busted his leg and needed her to take care of him. I watched her stroll away like it was no big deal, feeling a bitter smile creeping up on me. This time, I wasn't going to wait around anymore. It all started when I got a call from the hospital while I was having dinner with Emma at our favorite spot. The cold voice on the other end told me to rush to see my parents one last time. They'd been in a crash on their way to the restaurant and were barely hanging on, clinging to their last breaths. They were waiting for me. After the call ended, my hands were shaking as I reached out to grab Emma's hand. Instead, she shoved mine away with irritation. "Why aren't your parents here yet? Didn't you say everything was sorted? Look, I'm not willing to marry into your family just to work like a servant. Show me some respect." "Okay, Emma. My parents are in a car accident, barely holding on. We need to get to the hospital," I insisted, pulling her towards the exit. It was scorching outside, the air so thick I could hardly breathe. Suddenly, she yanked her hand free to answer her phone. Her sweet voice sounded like nails scraping a chalkboard. "Hey, boss. Be careful. I'll be right there." It was him again. Jake. My mind was spinning as I fumbled for my keys, but Emma snatched them away. "Jake says Alex broke his leg and there's no one to take care of him. Can I borrow the car for a bit?" It felt like the cruelest joke. Tears welled up and I couldn't stop them. "Emma, my parents are dying, and you're asking for the car to see your senior?" Her face turned ghostly pale for a second before she stomped her foot and walked away. The hospital probably blew things out of proportion, but I'd already seen Alex's injured leg in the photos. "Can you stop being so jealous?" I didn't want to argue anymore. I grabbed the keys and jumped into the car. If Emma didn't come with me today, then that was it. We were done. 10 years of being her pushover was enough. Seeing my resolve, she gave me a sneer and strutted away with swagger. I didn't waste any more time and sped to the hospital. When I arrived, I rushed to the front desk, asked for my parents' names, and quickly found their room. My hands were trembling as I stood before the door, praying nothing was terribly wrong. Suddenly, the door swung open, and a figure wrapped in a white sheet was pushed out. It felt like the world was falling apart until someone inside called my name. I walked in to find my parents in their beds, arms and legs in casts, but not in critical condition. Relief washed over me as I rushed over. My mom wiped away my tears, telling me not to worry. I held their hands, feeling immense gratitude. Nothing's more important than family being safe. My mom, still weak, asked where Emma was. "They wanted to apologize for being late," I said, forcing a smile. Deep down, I wanted to tell them Emma and I had broken up, but I didn't want them to feel guilty. I'd handle it later. After making sure everything was okay, I left the room to grab some food for them. Then my phone buzzed with a message from Emma, pictures attached. One showed Alex's leg wrapped in bandages, and the other was a flawless selfie of her. Her message read, "Jake, your attitude today was terrible. I love that new Chanel bag." I couldn't help but laugh mockingly. Everyone knew that Jason, the eldest son of the Lee family, had been into Emma for 10 years. Ever since she transferred to our elementary school, I had followed her everywhere, doing whatever she wanted. After we got together, I never dared to neglect her. Every time a new designer bag dropped, I bought it for her without her even asking. But now, looking back, it felt more disgusting than swallowing something foul. She hadn't once asked about my parents' condition. In fact, I had planned to propose to her after our dinner tonight. With my head down, I walked forward, not expecting to bump into anyone. Instead, I ran into a female doctor. She wore a white coat, but it didn't hide her stunning figure. Her almond-shaped eyes sparkled as she looked at me. With an apologetic smile, she gently pulled at a nearby nurse's sleeve. "Sorry, Mr. Lee, I'm new here. When I saw the ambulance arrive, I panicked and gave a false alarm." Her voice sounded familiar. As soon as she finished, I realized she was the young lady who had called me earlier. She introduced herself as Dr. Lilly, my parents' primary doctor. There's no need to worry. Your parents just have some scrapes and fractures. Nothing too serious. I nodded, ready to leave, but noticed the nurse beside her still trembling with fear. I paused and tried to lighten the mood. No need to be so scared, just don't make that mistake again. Seeing them relax, I didn't stick around. But the next moment, someone grabbed my arm, a soft sensation pressing against it. Lily smiled warmly. Jason, aren't you going to add me on WeChat? For some reason, she felt familiar, though I couldn't place why. I nodded and quickly added her. Just as I finished, Emma's call came through. I declined it, but she kept trying to reach me. I wasn't about to indulge her, so I blocked her. That's when my friend sent me a photo from the school forum. The picture showed Alex with Emma, half of her body draped over him, both looking flushed. Not exactly normal. Most of the comments were mocking me. It was laughable that Jason, the heir to a leading company, had been a pushover for so many years and ended up with nothing. I deleted all photos and posts about Emma from my social media and made an official announcement. I'm single, please don't bother me. After posting, I turned off my phone, grabbed the takeout I had ordered, and brought it upstairs. Once everything was settled and my parents were asleep, I finally had a moment to breathe. Today was supposed to be the happiest day. I was going to introduce Emma to my parents, share a lovely meal, go for a walk to strengthen our bond, and propose to her in front of them. But none of that was happening now. From today on, both the name Emma and the person herself were gone from my life. In the quiet of the hospital room, my phone rang at the worst possible moment. The caller ID showed an unknown number. Afraid of waking my parents, I quickly answered and stepped outside. Emma's familiar voice was shouting, Jason, what do you mean by that? Why did you post that on social media? Do you have any idea how many people are laughing at me right now? I stayed silent as she kept ranting, basically saying that if I apologized, bought her the latest designer bag, and publicly announced our relationship again, she'd forgive me. I was about to light a cigarette when I remembered I was in the hospital. After she finally finished, I chuckled. Emma, you never asked me how my parents are doing. There was a brief silence before she raised her voice again. Well, how are Uncle and Auntie? You're so calm. They must be fine. I told you the hospital always exaggerates. I didn't want to explain anything more. Not far away, Dr. Lily was walking towards me with a medical chart. Suddenly, a vengeful thought crossed my mind. Without hesitation, I said into the phone, I have a new girlfriend now. Don't call me again. I quickly muted the phone and asked Lily to pretend to be my girlfriend. She looked a bit startled, but nodded quickly. When I turned the sound back on, I could hear Emma's mocking tone saying, There's no way you could fall for someone else. Hello, I'm Jason's girlfriend. I hope you'll stop calling him from now on. Lily's voice was soft, yet firm, and for some reason, it calmed my restless heart. After that, Emma abruptly hung up. I looked at Lily, still processing everything, until she waved her hand in front of me, snapping me back to reality. Hello, my boyfriend, she said sweetly, her smile radiant. Sorry, I got caught up in the moment and used you as a cover. She slowly moved closer, and I caught a faint whiff of her perfume. Lily's face was so close that I could see the fine hairs on her skin. My breathing slowed. Just as I was about to step back, she suddenly pulled away. It's okay. There's plenty of time in the future. With that, she was called away by a nurse in a hurry. For the next few days, I skipped school, staying by my parents' side to take care of them. On the school forum, people even started a betting pool on when I, Jason, would grovel and beg Emma to take me back. I saw that Emma bet on 7 days, and others followed her lead, also betting on 7 days. I chuckled, thinking, on what grounds do these people think I'd keep being Emma's pushover? Without hesitation, I added an option. Never. I, Jason, will never have anything to do with Emma again. Just then, another unknown number called. I immediately hung up. These past few days, every unknown call had been Emma, trying different ways to reach me, counting the days. Today was the 7th day. Lily, holding the medical report, came as usual to check on my parents, and they couldn't stop smiling at her, suppressing my emotions. I watched as she gently tended to them. On the third day of my parents' hospital stay, I told them about the amicable breakup. Although it was sudden, they were business people after all. After a brief moment of surprise, they accepted the truth. After finishing the checkup, Lily was about to leave when the hospital room door was suddenly pushed open. Emma rushed in with bags in hand, smiling brightly as she ran toward me. After putting down her things, she grabbed my arm intimately and introduced herself to my parents. "Hello, Uncle, Auntie, I'm Emma. I'm so glad you're both all right." The room fell silent. I quickly pulled my hand away and stepped back. Emma's face changed instantly, but she didn't push further. Lily just quietly observed everything. "Yes, my friend," I clarified, drawing boundaries while thanking Emma for the gifts. My parents politely invited her to sit, and Lily stood to the side, no longer planning to leave. "Uncle, Auntie, Jason and I wanted to come see you sooner, but something came up that day, so I couldn't come with him. Jason also said that since we'll be family in the future, you wouldn't mind." She kept talking, completely oblivious to the growing displeasure on my parents' faces. Strangely enough, in the past, I would have helped her cover any lie she told. But now her words felt unbearably revolting. As Emma spoke, she leaned closer to my mom, almost knocking over a tube. Thankfully, Lily swiftly intervened. "Please don't be too loud in the hospital," she said coldly, her voice carrying the authority of a doctor. I sighed in relief, ready to take Emma outside to set things straight, but she suddenly stood up, pointing at Lily in a fit of rage. "Are you the one who made that phone call the other day?" Lily didn't deny it, smiling faintly and nodding. The next second, Emma lost control, charging at her as if to attack. I immediately placed myself in front of Lily, grabbing Emma's raised hand and pushing it away. "Emma, stop acting crazy. And for the record, we've already broken up." I spoke firmly, more certain than ever that she was unworthy. "Jason, you'll regret this." Emma's eyes were red, tears almost falling. With those harsh words, she turned and stormed out. The previously warm and cheerful atmosphere in the room was shattered. I walked out in silence. 2 days later, my parents were finally discharged. I hired a caregiver to look after them, and only after feeling at ease did I return to school. The school was as lively as ever. Passing by the basketball court, I saw Alex, and I have to admit, he was quite good-looking, clean and fresh-faced. He could play basketball and had a way with words. Just as I was about to head back to the teaching building, a group of people started whispering. Coincidentally, they were talking about me. I looked up to see where the commotion was coming from, only to find Emma in a revealing cheerleader outfit wildly cheering for Alex. I suddenly remembered how she used to scoff whenever I asked her to attend my piano competitions. And now, here she was, dressed like that, shouting encouragement at the top of her lungs. "Tsk, really not worth it," I muttered, lowering my head and pretending to check my phone while quickening my pace. But a pair of straight legs appeared in front of me, and without looking, I knew it was Emma. "Jason, how long are you going to keep this up? Keep this up," she said. I almost wanted to laugh. "Move," I frowned, my patience about to snap. A crowd had already gathered around us, many raising their phones to take pictures. Emma loved being the center of attention, but I didn't. "If you're really that angry, I'll apologize. That day was an emergency. You have no idea how fragile Alex was when I arrived." Fragile. Alex was fragile, and that somehow means my parents' situation didn't compare to a random upperclassman's. I sneered, looking down at her. "Emma, I don't want to be harsh, but you should be able to tell by now that I don't like you anymore. Don't compare just anyone to my parents. You really should think about whether they even deserve it." I spoke loudly enough for the people around us to gasp. Emma's face turned pale, her hand trembling as it gripped my wrist. I glanced disdainfully at her outfit, then looked away. I didn't wear this on purpose. Alex said no one was cheering for him, and I didn't want him to lose face. "Don't misunderstand me, Jason." Her voice was filled with anxiety, but her words were full of holes. Did she still think I was the fool I used to be? Alex put down the basketball and walked over. I just quietly watched him. He had always found various excuses to ask for Emma's help, but anyone could see how deliberate it all was. If you have something to say it. Why bully a girl? Alex stepped forward, acting like he was standing up for justice, which almost made me laugh. A perfect match. These two really were a perfect match. My phone rang at the worst moment. When I checked, it was my advisor calling. I was ready to leave, but the crowd had already closed in. Emma was still crying her heart out, looking like a victim. I was at my wit's end, ready to push through the crowd and run. Then, a familiar voice came over the loudspeaker. A famous international star is filming at the east gate of the school right now. In an instant, most of the onlookers rushed away. Emma collapsed in tears on Alex's shoulder. I turned my head away, no longer watching. My advisor wanted me to organize the badminton competition. As the president of the badminton club, I naturally had to take responsibility. My parents had just been discharged from the hospital, and I was running between home and school completely exhausted. I had a stack of sign-up sheets on my desk when Lily appeared in front of me. I thought I was seeing things. "Sign me up," she said in her usual soft voice, smiling as always, seeing my confusion about her presence. She explained that she had been accepted into the school's exchange program and was here to bring me the results of my parents' follow-up checkup. I nodded and added her name to the list. "I want to sign up too." Out of nowhere, Emma appeared, grabbing the sign-up sheet and filling out her name. After she finished, she glared at Lily with hostility. I knew her possessiveness was kicking in. In the past, I had rejected all relationships with other girls for her, always keeping a cold distance from others. But she had always had people around her. I never minded before, thinking that no matter what, I would always be her number one, the most important person in her life. I had stayed with her for 10 years, giving her everything I could. But in the end, it was all so laughable. To her, my parents' lives were worth less than Alex's leg. At that thought, the last trace of pity I had for her vanished. "There's no chance, Emma. There will never be a chance again." Emma held a bottle of water in her hand. After signing up, she handed it to me, trying to please. I stared at it in silence, not responding. Her phone, lying on the table, lit up. I glanced at it casually. It was a message from Alex. "Emma, are you here yet? The movie is about to start." I lowered my eyes, hiding all my emotions. Emma hurriedly picked up her phone, making sure I hadn't seen it, then spoke again. "Jason, the advisor needs to talk to me. I'll find you tomorrow." She had used that same lame excuse countless times before. I looked up, staring at her quietly. "Emma, no one likes love that can't see the light of day." After Emma left, Lily sat down beside me. Today, the admissions officer had taken the day off, so I was here to help out. But badminton wasn't exactly a popular sport, so in a way, Lily signing up was already helping. The atmosphere grew quiet, and I didn't know what to say. "Aren't you going to thank me?" she asked. I turned my head as she continued. "I just saved you from that boiling pot earlier." In an instant, I remembered that familiar voice on the loudspeaker. It had been Lily. I smiled and nodded. "I should really thank you for that." Just as I was about to make a polite remark, she quickly replied, "And how about taking a walk by the river with me this weekend? I haven't been back in a long time, and I want to see if it's still the same as it was." I felt a bit dazed. That was where I fell in love with Emma. I was young back then, already a bit mischievous. I loved skipping stones by the river. The first time I saw Emma was by the river. She wore a tattered dress and her face was dirty. She told me her family always fought, and she often didn't have enough to eat. So that day, I took all the pocket money I had saved, bought her a beautiful dress, and took her to a fancy restaurant. She ate voraciously, then squinted her eyes and said, "Thank you, you're so kind." I guess that's when I decided I wanted to take care of her for the rest of my life. Years later, when I wanted to take her back to the river, she always scoffed. "What's there to see? It's just a river, nothing more." Lily waved her hand in front of my face, pulling me back from my memories. "So, are you coming or not?" she asked again. This time, I nodded. The badminton competition was set for Friday, and quite a few people showed up. It seemed the publicity team had really put in some effort. The tournament was single elimination, so the beginners were quickly knocked out. I had originally thought Lily was a novice, but to my surprise, her skills were impressive. She wore her hair in a high ponytail, revealing her elegant collarbones. Every movement she made had a goddess-like grace. The younger students had already started cheering her on. Soon, only Emma and Lily were left in the women's bracket. I didn't know how long Lily had been practicing, but I knew exactly how long Emma had trained because I had taught her myself. The day she asked me to teach her badminton, I asked why. She stammered something about just being interested. I didn't think too much of it. So I arranged a time and taught her with all my heart. 3 days later, I saw her playing on the court with Alex, exchanging rally after rally. That's when I realized why she wanted to learn. I was angry back then, but Emma just frowned and accused me of making a big deal out of nothing. It's just badminton with him. Why do you have to be so unreasonable? Can't you stop being so paranoid? It really bothers me. And if I were involved with him, it would have happened by now, don't you think? The rest of my words were swallowed back down. Emma turned her head toward the crowd, and when she realized the cheering wasn't for her, she frowned. I knew she was angry because she had always wanted to be the center of attention. I worried a bit for Lily because a furious Emma could be hard to deal with. But as it turned out, my worries were unnecessary. Lily's skills were clearly far more advanced than Emma's. Perhaps others couldn't see it, thinking they were evenly matched. But I had been trained in all sorts of skills from a young age, and Lily's every move mirrored the professional training I had received. Sure enough, it wasn't long before Emma started to tire. Suddenly, she stumbled and fell to the ground, clutching her leg and shouting in pain. The crowd began to stir, and Lily quickly rushed to check on her. I followed the crowd over to where Lily was handling the situation. She looked at Emma's injured leg, treated it briefly, then breathed a sigh of relief. It's just a minor sprain, nothing serious. Emma suddenly shoved Lily away, her face filled with anger. Don't touch me. Alex immediately swooped in, picking Emma up and shouting at Lily. You're not a professional, so why are you pretending to be? If something goes wrong, are you going to take responsibility? His tone was full of disdain, and Emma had pushed Lily hard enough to make her stumble. I couldn't hold back my anger anymore. I helped Lily up, then glared coldly at Alex and Emma. Injuries during a match aren't unusual. Lily is a doctor. If you don't believe her, you're free to go see someone else. And Emma, don't let me see you lay a hand on Lily again. From the moment I entered this school, I had never said a harsh word to anyone. Maybe that's why people felt free to turn my private life into entertainment. But perhaps they forgot. I was never an ordinary person. If I wanted someone to pay the price, it would be easy. Sure enough, Alex's face changed instantly, and he couldn't say a word for a long time. He simply carried Emma to the infirmary, still in my arms. Emma seemed to be over her pain, whining that she wanted to walk and demanding that I carry her instead. I didn't bother responding. I just brushed the dust off Lily's back. Are you okay? How are you feeling? After all, the incident had happened during the competition I had organized. Lily had kindly helped, only to be met with ungratefulness. It needed to be handled properly. Lily shook her head, indicating that she was fine, and then habitually tucked her hair behind her ear. A faint birthmark behind her ear caught my attention. I felt like I'd seen it somewhere before, but I couldn't quite place it. My phone buzzed with a message from Alex saying Emma was throwing a tantrum, refusing to take her medicine unless I came to see her. I frowned, thought for a moment, and replied swiftly, then let her suffer. This time, because of the issue during the competition, the mixed doubles matches were pushed back. Lily came to me saying she had no partner. So naturally, I agreed to help her as a way of thanking her, to practice our coordination. We rented a court and practiced relentlessly, but for some reason, every time I got close to her, I felt a strange sense of familiarity. It was a feeling I couldn't quite describe. When we had practiced enough, we sat down side by side to rest. Her hair was damp with sweat, clinging to her skin. Once again, the birthmark behind her ear caught my attention. I found myself staring, lost in thought. until our faces grew uncomfortably close, snapping me back to reality. Lily seemed excited and even leaned in, pulling her hair back to show me clearly. "Look closely, Jason. Really look at this mark behind my ear." I looked at her in confusion, her eyes sparkling with excitement, a bit too much, but I couldn't resist the lure of familiarity, so I examined it carefully. Even so, nothing came to mind. "Well, what do you think? Does it remind you of anything?" I frowned and shook my head. "It looks familiar, but I can't say more than that." Her brightness dimmed instantly. When we parted, Lily still seemed off, but I didn't think too much of it. Once Emma recovered, the competition was rescheduled. This time, Emma paired up with Alex. The final match drew a much larger crowd than before. Our tangled four-way relationship had become prime gossip material. The match began, and it quickly became clear how much our professional training gave Lily and me an advantage. Playing against Emma and Alex was laughably easy for us. The outcome was predictable. We won. As I was walking out with Lily, Emma blocked our path. Her expression was one of reluctance. But finally, she seemed to muster the courage to speak. "Jason, I'm willing to listen to whatever you say from now on. I'm confessing to you again, right here and now. Will you be with me?" The crowd started cheering again, most of them expecting me to follow Emma's lead. "As always, are you done? If so, I'm taking Lily out to dinner. Have some self-respect." Emma's face visibly shifted from disappointment to anger. In a final gesture, she grabbed Alex's hand and dramatically walked away with him. I just shook my head, feeling more indifferent than ever. With the tournament over, I could finally take a break. A lot had happened recently, as if everything had changed in an instant and many things had been let go. My parents were busy with the company, and I enjoyed the peace and quiet. Aside from the occasional texts from Emma, who kept changing her number to message me, things had escalated somehow. She had convinced Alex to plead on her behalf. Even Alex began asking me to give her another chance. Finally fed up, I agreed to meet Alex to have a serious talk, but made it clear that if I saw Emma, I would leave immediately. Alex chose a private room at a quiet restaurant. The place wasn't cheap, but I vaguely remembered his family wasn't exactly rolling in dough. After sitting down, I got straight to the point. "What do you want to talk about?" Alex poured himself a drink and downed it in one gulp, then gave me a helpless smile. "Emma said she realizes she can't live without you. She asked me to come and explain." I smiled back. "Explain what? That there's nothing going on between us? It's all just a misunderstanding." He paused, then let out a long sigh before continuing. "It was all my one-sided feelings. It had nothing to do with her." I frowned, studying him. Despite the sincere look on his face, something felt off. "For the last time, I will never be with Emma again. And if you really like her, you shouldn't let her keep making a fool of herself. It's disgusting." Yes, disgusting. That was how I felt about everything involving Emma now. 10 years of feelings. And in the end, all I could call it was disgusting. She wasn't worth it. And it was only now that I finally realized it. Alex and I didn't part on good terms. On my way home, Lily texted me to meet her by the river. When I arrived, it was dusk. Lily stood by the water, her long hair blowing gently in the wind. Her figure was graceful. I walked over slowly, noticing that she didn't seem in a good mood. "Jason, is Emma the only person you remember?" I looked at her, confused. She turned to face me, and that's when I saw her face streaked with tears. "Jason, do you remember saving a little girl by this river?" I stared at her face, feeling a vague sense of familiarity. Just as I was about to speak, she suddenly jumped into the water. I gasped and immediately jumped in after her. The icy cold water pierced my skin, and in that instant, I remembered who Lily was. The birthmark behind her ear was the mark of our childhood promise. When we were kids, I called her Little Ear. Her family lived next door to mine, and I used to take her out to play all the time. One day, while skipping stones, she slipped and fell into the river. I jumped in to save her. The first thing she did when she woke up was slap me. Then she hugged me and cried. I was bewildered, but I patted her back to comfort her. Later, her family went abroad, and before leaving, she came to me and cried. I was bewildered, but I patted her back to comfort her. Later, her family went abroad. Before leaving, she came to me with her childish voice, asking me to look behind her ear. She said she had a beautiful flower there, and that I should use it to recognize her when we met again. Childhood me had nodded earnestly, promising never to forget her. But the grown-up me had shaken my head, having forgotten her completely. Although it was summer, when I carried Lily out of the water, she was still shivering with cold. With a stern expression, I took her home. The whole way back, she kept looking at me expectantly, repeating the same question. Did you remember? I was too angry to answer, and only after making sure she was settled did I softly reply, Yeah, I remembered, little ear. Lily was overjoyed, but after a moment she started crying again. I gently patted her back. Suddenly, Alex called, and on the other end, he said that Emma had cut her wrists. Both Lily and I were shocked. When we rushed to the hospital, we saw Emma, pale as a sheet. The doctor said it was a good thing she was brought in quickly, or else the situation could have been much worse. Alex stood by, deep in thought. When Emma woke up, I sat by her side. Jason, I really know I was wrong. Can't you stop this? Her eyes started welling up with tears again, but I felt nothing inside. In the past, my love justified everything. Because I loved her, I chose to forgive her. But now that I didn't love her anymore, I suddenly realized that the person in front of me wasn't as radiant as I once thought. Everything about her was, in some way, my creation. And she had taken it all for granted. Perhaps I truly loved that little girl from my childhood, but the grown-up Emma standing in front of me was someone I no longer recognized. Please, just forgive me this once. Okay, I'll listen to you from now on, and we'll be together. Her tone was pitiful, begging me over and over again. I simply looked at her quietly and, in the end, shook my head. I don't love you anymore. The more you act like this, the more I despise you. That sentence seemed to hurt her deeply. She let go of my hand, looking defeated, and left the room. Lily's hair still wasn't dry. She might catch a cold. That was the only thought running through my mind. When I got home, Lily sat obediently waiting for me to dry her hair. It was only then that I snapped back to reality. Something was wrong with me. Damn, little ear, she's looking more beautiful every day. After reconnecting with Lily, our relationship only grew closer. I'm not sure when it started, but we became inseparable. We went to classes together, ate together, and hung out together. The happiness I found with her was something I had never experienced before. And so, naturally, we ended up together. Later, I took her out to sea on a yacht. The night sky was full of dazzling stars, and in that intoxicating moment, I asked her, "Will you regret this?" Her answer was steady and gentle. "No, I'll never regret it. Not for my whole life." And that was that. A dark night, a strong wind, and everything was fully indulged. After we got back, we met each other's parents. Since both of our families were well matched, everything went smoothly. The date of our engagement was fast approaching, and I was getting closer and closer to happiness. I took Lily to try on wedding dresses and personally chose the restaurant for the reception. Everything was going well until one day, Emma started pounding on my apartment door, begging me to let her in. It was pouring rain outside, and in the end, I couldn't take it anymore. When I opened the door, I barely recognized the person standing there. Emma's hair was a mess, her eyes had dark circles, and she was painfully thin. She looked almost like a ghost. Jason, we're the ones who are supposed to be together. We've been together for 10 years. 10 years? How many more decades can I give to someone else? She was sobbing, gasping for air between her words. Out of human decency, I poured her a glass of water. Then, sitting calmly on the sofa, I said, "Emma, I loved you for 10 years too. But for those 10 years, you never once cherished me. You said you were out shopping with your girlfriends, but in reality, you went to a concert Alex invited you to. You took the money I gave you and used it to go out with him. You told me your family needed money, and without a second thought, I sent it to you, only to find out you gave it all to Alex. On my birthday, I rejected everyone else because I wanted to spend the day with you. But in the end, you left me waiting alone at the restaurant all night. Do I need to go on about where you were and who you were with that night? I looked at her, speaking slowly and clearly. There were plenty of other things I could have said. In many ways, I had never been your first choice, but I'd been too naive to believe it back then. Emma didn't say another word, just sat on the floor crying. Her crying was getting on my nerves. What now? Lily would be upset when she came back and saw the floor all dirty. Do you need something else? If not, please leave. I still need to make dinner for Lily. Emma flinched, and before leaving, she didn't forget to ask me for money. I laughed for a long time. 10 years of our relationship, and all she wanted now was money. But then I thought, paying for peace and quiet seemed worth it. Without much hesitation, I transferred the money over. The image of Lily walking toward me in her wedding dress is something I'll remember for the rest of my life. She was breathtakingly beautiful, and I personally slipped the ring onto her finger. Just as the ceremony was about to be completed, Emma burst in. She looked even more terrifying than before, neither fully human nor ghost, making everyone frown in disgust. Jason, give me money, or else I won't get any more stuff, and I'll be beaten to death. You need to give me money now. She was completely deranged, lost to madness. Lily was a little frightened, so I gently embraced her, softly reassuring her. The malice in Emma's eyes only grew, as if she was ready to kill us in the next second. The engagement party, which had been going so smoothly, was now ruined by this chaotic scene. I'm not the type to let things slide. Emma would have to pay for this. Suddenly, Alex's face popped into my head at the most inconvenient moment. Sure enough, when all the gathered evidence was laid out in front of me, everything became clear. Emma had become addicted to drugs, and it was all part of Alex's plan. For 4 months, Alex had been asking Emma for money under the guise of some nonsense about spiritual enlightenment, all to control my thoughts. I couldn't comprehend such craziness, but the most absurd part was that Emma actually believed it at first, until Alex took advantage of the situation and introduced her to substances she should never have touched. From that moment on, all the money in her account flowed directly to Alex. In addition, Alex deceived her with promises of lucrative investments, convincing her that she could make a fortune. Emma believed him, and that belief led to her complete downfall. I closed my eyes as I looked at the photos in the report. There was no trace of the school beauty she once was. Now she lay on the floor, covered in bruises, barking like a dog to entertain her employers. That's how she had become Alex's money-making machine. From being a source of wealth to now a slave to his schemes, Alex had been cunning from the start. He deliberately got close to Emma because he knew I would give her money. And all he had to do was turn that money into his own. And clearly, he succeeded. The door opened and Lily entered with a heavy expression. Emma's body was covered in injuries. Almost no part of her was unharmed. I knew how soft-hearted Lily was. Seeing Emma in that state must have been hard for her. I walked over and gently embraced her, slowly offering comfort. "It's okay, little ear. I'll take care of it." She nodded and sighed. I looked at the documents on the table, already formulating a plan in my mind. Emma had run away. If she didn't make money, Alex would beat her. Alex was careful. He made sure not to leave any DNA or fingerprints whenever he hit her. It was as if he knew this would all come to light one day, so he had prepared in advance. Once again, I found myself sitting in a private room with Alex. But this time, he didn't bother pretending anymore. He lounged back in his seat, his tone filled with contempt. "What's the matter, young master? Not enjoying your romantic life with your little doctor? Why bother calling me out? Don't tell me, have you fallen for Emma again?" His words were laced with sarcasm, and I just smiled, shaking my head. Alex, do you really think your plan was flawless? I stared him down, watching the fear flash in his eyes. He was afraid I'd found the evidence to put him away. To be honest, I wasn't sure at first, but persistence pays off. I had found the place where he first assaulted Emma. Maybe it was his first time, so he wasn't as careful, leaving enough evidence to incriminate him. The small cabin by the river on the west side. Ring any bells? His glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor, his eyes widening as he stared at me. Alex, you should have never forced a helpless woman to earn money for you. You've brought shame to all men. The arrest went smoothly. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Alex confessed everything. At the trial, Emma was present. She had recovered quite a bit after some treatment, but the scars were still there. Alex admitted that from the moment he met Emma, his intentions were never pure. It wasn't love. It had always been about money. And the fastest way to get money was through Emma because I was generous with her. Alex figured that with his looks, seducing Emma would be easy, and unfortunately, he was right. Emma believed him wholeheartedly, I thought. Lily quietly squeezed my hand. As Alex spoke, he suddenly turned to look at Emma. She flinched, not even daring to meet his eyes. Alex continued, "Oh, and that day you broke up for good. I faked the cast at the hospital. There was nothing wrong with me, I was just broke. But who would have thought you'd be so pathetic, not even able to hold on to Jason?" I forced myself to hold back the urge to punch him. This scum didn't deserve to live. Emma went from disbelief to breakdown to complete despair. In the end, she just fell silent, silently walking over to me. Tears streamed down her face. I looked up, meeting her gaze. Her eyes were filled with sorrow and regret. "I'm sorry, Jason. I didn't appreciate you. I had the best love, the best person, but I took it all for granted. I always thought your love for me was something I deserved, that it was just how things were meant to be." Her voice cracked as she sobbed, tears falling in large drops. But I forgot that no one is obligated to treat me that well. I threw you away because of this scum, and now I've lost you. I deserve this. I brought this upon myself. Jason, I regret it. I really, really regret it. Emma was sobbing uncontrollably, her fragile body collapsing to the ground. I just stood there, watching her in silence. Suddenly, something inside me let go. This was the woman I had loved for 10 years, but she didn't appreciate it. I knew I had resented her for that. But seeing me let go, this was the woman I had loved for 10 years, but she didn't appreciate it. I knew I had resented her for that, but seeing her like this, I suddenly felt like it didn't matter anymore. Let it all go. Besides, I already had my little ear by my side. Lily tightened her grip on my hand, and I, half laughing, squeezed her hand back. Alex was sentenced to death, and in the end, only his father came to see him. The old man, frail with age, approached with a tattered card in hand. Speaking in a thick accent, he pleaded with the judge. "I've got money. My boy said money can fix things. Did my boy make a mistake? I'll give you money. Just give me my boy back." His voice cracked, and he kept waving that worn card around. Alex no longer had that fearless look he once had. He just stared at the old man, tears streaming down his face. "Dad, please don't do this. I'm the one who let you down." I closed my eyes, unable to watch anymore. A year later, Lily and I finally got married. Little Ear looked absolutely stunning in her wedding dress. We traveled back and forth frequently. Her parents lived abroad, while mine were in the country. Eventually, we agreed to bring her parents back to live with us. After all, no place is better than home. Alex was sentenced to death, and Emma left the country. But every year on my birthday, I still received a message at midnight wishing me well. That tradition never stopped. One more thing, Little Ear was going to be a mom. I'd also made sure that Alex's father was being taken care of. After all, the two of them only had each other. With Alex gone, the old man's life would have been impossible otherwise. Little Ear had become Big Ear now, and she was going to give birth to a baby girl. It looked like we'd truly be one big happy family now.